When I was about 7 years old, I had thought I had found the perfect friend. I mean, this was a kid that we used to play with his toys and spend time together for hours on end, joking, laughing, and just enjoying everything that comes with life when you're that young. But one day, that ended. Not because of a fight, not because of a disagreement, but for one very painful thing, that I was black. Around this time, when I was around 7 years old, I lived in an apartment complex, and I happened to meet another young child who also lived in the apartment complex, so a white child, and we became friends. And I will tell you, he had the coolest toys. And so I used to go over to his apartment all the time, and he would bring the toys out of his apartment, and we would play on the patio in front of his door for hours on end, and we had a great time. And it was funny because every time a new toy rolled out, I would always go over to his place to see if he got it. And guess what he did? Because guess what you do when you're a kid? You always want to hang with the kid with the brand new cool toys. And it was interesting because it was innocent. He enjoyed having somebody to play with. I enjoyed playing with him. We sat there and we would roll out, and it would be the entire patio area would be covered with toys. The old toys he had, new toys we had, and it was just an awesome experience. We had the opportunity to engage each other and just do all the things that you would expect normal 7-year-old kids who are playing with each other and enjoying toys would do. So you can imagine how I felt this one particular day when I came over to his apartment and did my normal routine. It was not uncommon for me to come over. I'd knock on the door, and of course he would usually come to the door and be like, "Oh, yo, let me show you what we got." But this day was different. I didn't really understand that it was going to be different, but it was different. So I knocked on the door, and he comes to the door and he tells me, "I'm sorry, Tony, but we can't play anymore." Now, of course, I'm sitting here thinking, well, why not? So I'm trying to go through the mental Rolodex, kid that young. I'm thinking, did I say something? Did I do something? Did I offend you? And so I'm like, I don't understand. He's like, "No, we can't play anymore." And so, of course, being a child, what do? You ask the question, wait a minute, well, why can't we play anymore? Well, we can't play anymore because you're black. And then he proceeded to shut the door. And let me just tell you how confused I was. As a child, I literally sat there and didn't have a clue as to what happened. I mean, we had literally just got through playing maybe like the day before, and we had been playing with each other in terms of these toys for like a minute or two. And so I'm trying to wrap my brain around the fact that, wait a minute, what happened between today and yesterday that made you feel like you couldn't play with me? And more importantly, I've always been black. So what is it today about me being black that changed everything? And I will tell you, I was so confused. And it was funny because I didn't necessarily cry. I wasn't sad. I was just bewildered because as I left his apartment to come back to my own, I just kept hearing that phrase over and over again. "I can't play with you because you're black." I didn't know what was going on. Now, as an adult, looking back, I have to be completely honest. In my mind, this had to have something to do with his mom. Like me, he was in a single parent household. He was a white child with a white mother. I was a black child with a black mother. And you start putting little things together. And so like I always noticed that whenever I would come see him, he never invited me in the home. And of course, I'm looking at this as an adult because back then you don't look at it. Who cares? I don't care if you invite me in the home, just bring the toys out. But I noticed that he never invited me into the home. So we always had to play with the toys outside. Again, I'm thinking this is not uncommon. She never spoke to me. And so I never had a chance to engage. I would basically knock on the door. Either he would come to the door or she would come to the door. And when I asked for him, she would let him come out. And that was it. I can't recall if we actually had any kind of meaningful communication. But since he and I had been playing for such a long time, looking back, I have to be honest, I think something happened to her that had her feeling that this was no longer a relationship she wanted him to have. But the thing that was fascinating was that it's okay if you've decided you no longer want your child to engage with another child. That's a parent's prerogative. But the reality is that saying to me specifically that because of your race, who you are, that's the reason why you shouldn't interact, was even more kind of mind-boggling. But the reality is that up to this point, he and I had a long-standing interaction with each other. never had race come up. And of course, you're kids. You don't think about race from that standpoint. He's a kid. I'm a kid. He got toys. I want to play with toys. That's kind of the way the dynamics worked. But I started to realize as I became an adult that something else went on. And in one fell swoop, a relationship between two innocent children changed overnight. Because he was forced to make me feel like I was different. And she forced him to be the vehicle to make that happen. Mind you, she could have easily came to the door and said, he's not going to play with you anymore, and just shut the door. But literally, he communicated this. Now, don't get me wrong. There may have been a possibility where she didn't say for him to say that, because I don't know what their conversations was. But he said that probably because that's what he heard from his mother as the reason why she didn't want him playing with me anymore. I cannot stress enough that this was not uncommon for members of Black Generation X. You've got to remember, we're still in this space where we're in a desegregated environment. And it's not uncommon for us to be in a space one day that we think we're welcomed and then the next day be unwelcomed. Because keep in mind, as I have stressed repeatedly, the earlier generations, you knew where you were welcome and where you weren't welcome. But in this new desegregated society, we didn't always know. So this happening was just not something isolated to me. I guarantee you that there were many people of my generation who look like me who probably found themselves in one moment feeling like they were welcomed in a space, and then something would happen instantly, and now they're no longer welcome. For those of you who are listening to people tell you that we made it from this great transition and we're in this post-racial situation today, keep in mind that there were people who had to endure the pain of that transition. It's easy to look at the baby boomers and the greatest generation, the silent generation, and think about all of the direct harm that they experienced. But as we rolled into this new integrated, desegregated society, there were a lot of spaces where people who look like me didn't necessarily know that they would be unwelcomed at a moment's notice. We were of the belief, we were informed, we thought that every place we went into was a welcome space until it wasn't. This was our experience. So not only did we have these experiences, we had to learn how do we adapt quickly when we find ourselves in spaces where they were once welcome and now they're unwelcomed all in real time. And that was a skill that we had to pass on to future generations because we didn't always know that at a moment's notice, someone would make a determination that they were going to pivot away from being around us and that us being Black was now a negative thing. Always remember this. For Black Generation X, one of our realities is that we often found ourselves going into spaces and that one day we were a friend, and in that exact same moment, a few moments later, we would turn into a stranger. We had to figure out how to navigate that, and more importantly, we had to figure out how to help future generations recognize how to engage that.